The only decent opposition, if I may say so, Sir Desmond, is coming from the likes of you, Sir Graham Brady, these bold Tory backbenchers who are growing in number. Is there going to come a point fairly soon where you can numerically challenge this government and perhaps stop some of their more zealous measures getting through?
In terms of absolute numbers, no, because of the opposition voting with the government.
Yeah.
But it will become increasingly difficult for a conservative government to have to rely on the Labour Party to get its measures through. That would be deeply embarrassing, and I think they will certainly try and avoid that if at all possible. The reason why the opposition is coming from within the Conservative Party is that these things are very, very difficult for a Conservative to stomach, because our principal belief is in individual responsibility. And
yes.
that individuals make better decisions for themselves, their families and their communities than the state can possibly make on their behalf. And that's why this is so galling for a Conservative. If I were a socialist and believed in collective responsibility and the demands of the collective over the individual, and that the government and the man in Whitehall does indeed know best, then I wouldn't be in the state of apoplexy that I am at the moment.
Yeah, well, you and me both. We're all in a state of apoplexy. Do you feel that your message is, at least in some small way, getting through to Boris and Matt and the gang? Because, as I said earlier, I think for lots of us, we feel we're screaming perfectly reasonable statements about, do lockdowns work? Surely it's an argument that they do more harm than good. Can we not just protect the vulnerable and get back to normal and save the economy? These are all eminently reasonable points that Matt Hancock in particular likes to dismiss as outriding views and cranky and nutcase views. They're not. Is this government at least beginning to take on board your reservations about their approach to this crisis, Sir Desmond?
Well, at the margin, and so yes, they're opening the gyms, and yes, that we've now got an hour's drink up time. So at the margin we're having that effect, but I'm afraid it's still very much like standing on the touchline at a soccer match, shouting at the players, in the hope that they might listen to what we as spectators have got to say, but it's a hope at least, and it does, going through that process of shouting does at least have some palliative effect on the apoplexy.
Makes you feel better.
It makes me feel better. But I'll keep at it in the hope that someday they will get the message.
What about them saying it's like the final big push, just to clear it out?
Yeah, it's rather a long final push, considering he's talking about Easter now.
Yeah.
Well, hold on. I remember when it was just we had to make it through to the summer.
I know. Just never stops.
And it was, just one. Flatten the curve till the summer. Then the good weather will come along, and the disease will abate, and we'll have some herd immunity. What happened to that?
No, exactly. Now, what I think is the rather sinister success story of the government and Sage is persuading the nation that somehow or other we're fighting the bubonic plague and millions of us face instant death. They have created a central narrative which very, very few people are challenging. I would like to challenge it and say that, yes, of course we accept that the coronavirus is a nasty thing. It does kill some people, relatively few, and some people get very ill. But the numbers are still pretty vanishingly small. And for nearly everybody, for 99.5% of people make a full recovery after a few days discomfort. So this is a crisis that is misrepresented, I think. It is over the top. What do you think about that?
I think that the avoiding the deaths was never the issue, because the number of deaths is similar to what you would expect in a moderate to bad flu season. And indeed, flu has been killing more than COVID recently. I think it comes down to what was said at the beginning: protect the NHS. I think they were much more worried about scenes such as they had in northern Italy, with queues outside the hospitals, decisions being made about ventilators and all the rest, and this belief that the NHS would be knocked over and we'd have that disaster on our hands. I think that was the fear that drove the actions for lockdown and all the rest, rather than the fear of a very large number of deaths, which frankly have never materialised in the way that the NHS falling over has never materialised. But I think that was the fear, and that's why they built up this Project Fear, so that people would act in a way that wouldn't put the NHS at risk. And I think that, if we are going to prepare ourselves for any future virus that might actually, in terms of, when viruses come along, weren't we lucky that it was this one, rather than one that really was kill bad. Hundreds of thousands of people? I think we just have to get ourselves into a state where we are prepared with an NHS that isn't going to fall over in those circumstances. We created these Nightingale hospitals in record time, a tremendous achievement, but actually we've never been able to staff them.
Yeah, we never had the staff. It was a white elephant. They were white elephants.
Yeah.
Was it responsible of the government and SAGE to go along with this suggestion of SAGE that we must stress the personal risk to every citizen of this country? In other words, they literally wrote a memo saying we have to make everyone scared, every single person scared of this, in order to get compliance to our various rules and regulations. I think that's an abrogation of governmental duty. I don't think you should do that, because you are playing with people's minds, and frankly, this country is now paying the cost of that.
Well, I think that part of the toll we've seen in the deterioration of mental health comes down to people being so anxious and so frightened. They've been terrified.
And people not getting diagnosed if they've got something they're worried about as well.
Well, that's certainly the case.
Yeah.
But we have engendered this sense of fear and panic and mass hysteria.
Yes, and also, of course, Whitty and Valance. I just don't think you can stress this enough. The way that they were giving us, 4,000 people a day will die, 50,000 people a day will catch it. Oh, by the way, that's not a prediction, that's a scenario. As I always say, you might as well say 1 million people will die if it's just a scenario. That is naked, obvious, barefaced, disgraceful scaremongering.
Yes, well, I'm glad it turned out that way. I don't want to say you promised us 4,000 deaths today.
You liar!
I'm glad we haven't got them.
Yeah, but we haven't seen the queues, have we? But there are people.
Come on, where's the 4,000?
There's people who have been dying of cancer, haven't they? That hasn't come out yet. Thousands of people.
Yeah, we're talking about the economic ramifications of these lockdowns, which is obviously catastrophic. But also, as Ash just said, the other scandal, which is going to ring loud for many years to come, is the fact that we know that at least 50,000 people have died because they couldn't get or didn't get hospital treatment because the NHS became a kind of COVID-only service. That was profoundly wrong as well. There have been a catalogue of mistakes in this process, I think.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. If you turn the NHS into an engine to deal with COVID, it's not been, although we were told that the NHS is open for all sorts of other business, the reality is in the figures of those people who've died of strokes and heart attacks at home because they weren't getting treatment. It's the huge deficit in the numbers of cancer cases that have now not been diagnosed. There's a huge drop, and that's not because people are not getting cancer.
Yeah, and then of course you've also got, as you said, there's a tremendous mental health problems permeating through the nation now, and the suicide rate is rocketing. So this is serious stuff, isn't it?
Well, if you can't see your relatives and you're worried about the whole state of the world and you're terrified, you can imagine that for people who are already depressed or anxious or have mental health problems, the temptation to end it all would be rather greater than it otherwise it would have been, particularly if there aren't all sorts of services on hand and it's difficult to get an appointment with your GP or to see someone who might be helpful.